Hello everybody, welcome to today's non-beach walk blog. So today I wanted to just briefly talk a little bit about levers, and this is something I've spoken about before, and I just wanted to go over some key points with levers, because running and indeed all movement is about levers and about how we create the levers that we want to create the movement that we want to produce. So of course we're always going to be talking about running, and I'm going to be comparing that to certain strength-based exercises that we see people performing, that we see recommendations in magazines, etc, etc. So the first thing I want to say is about when your foot hits the ground. So let's start from that point, because that is the beginning of the gait cycle, the initiation, or the initial contact of one foot on the ground through to the same foot contacting the ground 2 steps later. So my right foot hits the ground, and the lever that I'm creating at that point is my foot is outstretched in front of my center of mass, because remember, we cannot land underneath our center of mass. That is not possible. We land in front of our center of mass, and also the faster we're running, the further away from our center of mass that we land. That's a key point right there. So if I'm landing in front of my center of mass, which I have to do, there's absolutely no argument on that one, then I'm creating a lever action where essentially my center of mass is behind my support leg. So the lever I'm creating is this lever. So here's my center of mass, and my foot is out here. So the lever I'm having to create is a pulling back action, and at the same time I'm also having to keep my torso pretty much vertical relative to my center of mass. So that's the first lever action that I want to talk about. That is a predominantly a adductor hamstring lever action with the calf in there as well. There's a lot more muscles, of course. We're just kind of going through the main muscles that people will know. Now, when I hit the ground and I've already been pulling my leg backwards before it hits the ground, before that initial contact, I want to be pulling the leg back, so that then when the leg hits the ground, I then essentially sling my body over the top. So it becomes this whipping action, almost like a dog ball launcher, where you pull the ball in the launcher back and then you release it and ping it forward. So it's almost like that kind of action. So before my foot hits the ground, I'm already pulling it back, foot hits the ground, and then I become a human dog ball launcher. I kind of like that analogy. So that kind of sets the tone for the levers that we're producing here. They're quite long connections. It's not just one joint, it's multiple joints in multiple locations. Now, at that point when I've hit the ground, I should already be rotating my torso. So if my right foot hits the ground, I should already be rotating my torso to the left. Okay? Now that is another lever action. So my pelvis at that point will be rotating to the right. It will be rotating this way. So if my right foot hits the ground, my left leg is off the ground, my pelvis will be rotating this way to sling my left leg over the top. My torso will be rotating the other way. Okay, so I've got that peppermill action occurring, and that's another lever that's occurring at the same time. So there's three very long levers, or one very long lever, but 3 levers that are going on at the same time. Multiple levers, because they all have to lever off of something, right? So that's the first thing. The leg hits the ground, I'm pulling the leg back. Just as the leg hits the ground, I start to sling myself over the top. Essentially, it's that dog ball launcher action. My torso rotates counterclockwise, anti-clockwise, my pelvis rotates clockwise. So I've got all of those things going on at the same time. So when I've got those things occurring there, I don't want to collapse my ankle, and I don't want to go into a squat. So my foot's hit the ground, I'm pulling it back. I'm also going to be elevating the heel, so that lever action that goes from the hip down past the knee also goes all the way down to the foot, goes through the arches of the foot down to the toes. So that lever is really long. So I don't want my ankle to collapse, I don't want my foot to collapse, and I don't want to end up going down towards the ground. There is some knee flexion, there is some hip flexion, there is some ankle dorsiflexion as well, but we don't want it to be excessive. We don't want to turn it into this boing, boing, boing action. We don't want to turn it into that because we're slinging. Okay, so next lever action I want to talk about is the spine. So the spine, not quite sure how to describe this easily. It's a column with curves and multiple joints. So there's lots of joints in there in the spine. All right, so each one of those is moving slightly independently of the next, but also connected to the next, highly connected to the next. So there's multiple lever actions going on there. There's rotation going on there. There's also lateral flexion. So we've got the right leg hitting the ground. I'll be rotating my torso anti-clockwise. My pelvis will be rotating clockwise for that peppermill effect. And then my torso, my spine will be laterally flexing at the same time as it's rotating. And that's one of the real key parts to the spine, is these curves. And when we laterally flex the spine, we naturally generate rotational torque. We generate a rotational action. So if I laterally flex, so you see where my camera is right now, if I laterally flex, I start to generate rotation in my torso. I also start to generate, if my spine is able to, which it should be naturally, I should start to generate rotation the opposite direction in my pelvis. And there's that peppermill effect again. Now, at the same time as we've got all that happening in the spine, we've got to keep our head in alignment. So our head needs to remain level. And that's the role of my neck muscles, amongst others as well. So I'm rotating, I'm driving my leg back, I'm slinging myself over the top, but I've still got to maintain a level gaze. Okay, I need to maintain my eye line level with the horizon, pretty much. So there's another lever action. And then I've got the shoulder joint. So I'm actually rotating and I'm flexing and internally rotating my shoulder joint. My elbow's also flexing. So I've got all of these lever actions going on, and we've only really talked about one side of the body. The other side of the body is doing the exact opposite. So as my pelvis rotates, the opposite leg, the swing leg, the one that's not on the ground, starts to swing forwards. That is a lever action as well, because it's swinging underneath me. It's also a lever action. And the hip goes into flexion. It's another lever action. That's the same action as the bicep lever. All right, not a very efficient one. There's a lot of weight there, but that's why we need to make it a slinging action, so that we save those muscles and we put that stretch reflex into the fascia, and that helps us to get that power. And then not only have I got that lever going on, I've then got the knee extension lever as well. All right, and then at the same time I've got the dorsiflexion lever, and then the whole thing switches. So I start to get that pullback action from the left hamstring, and the whole thing reverses. All right, so there's tons of levers going on there. I think I counted 17 levers in total. There's so many lever actions. All right, so looking at things like squats and deadlifts, they're not really doing a great deal for those lever actions to occur. In fact, they're not training them at all. Things like step-ups. So we might do step-ups like this. Not really. They're not really getting those lever actions because I'm not slinging my body weight over anything. I'm generating upward force, so or downward force to lift me upwards. There is, of course, there's a lever action there because every movement involves levers, but it's not the levers that we want to create. It's not the actions. It's not the movements that we want to produce, and therefore we're using the wrong muscles in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm making this blog a really short one today because I don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to start this process of thinking about levers and lever actions because the next one I want to talk about the different types of levers and why we have them. And I want to get you to think of levers that are efficient, levers that are not efficient, and muscle size and length of levers and the arrangement of levers. It's a huge subject, so I just wanted to open the door on this one right now and just get you thinking away from linear movement and getting you thinking about rotational movement with those levers. And that is today's Beach Walk blog on levers. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.